the president of Caucus for America, Rabbi Aryeh Spero. Rabbi, we welcome you to America's Forum and we thank you for your time.
My pleasure, JD.
Rabbi, it is great to have you Skyping in, and let's talk about the situation. These clashes are causing trouble for the Jewish community of Odessa. Many people planning to evacuate should the violence in the city get worse. Can you give us a historical overview of the Jews in Odessa and why so many there are so desperate to leave?
It's a very good question. Odessa is part of the Ukraine, and historically, the Ukraine was the most anti-Semitic region in all of Europe. During the Holocaust, much of the Holocaust was made possible because of the complicity, the eager complicity of the Ukrainian population against the Jewish population. Now, the Jews had been in the Ukraine for centuries, hundreds of years, predating some of the people that called themselves Ukrainians. So there is a history to the blood-curdling anti-Semitism. There have been pogroms. Pogroms not on a small scale, but where 100,000 Jews were killed, or 150,000 Jews were killed during the time of Chmelnytsky. So what happens when you have these eruptions that you're having now in Ukraine between Russia and the Ukrainians? Anti-Semitism is given an open door. And I think that's why the Jewish population is right in being very worried, and they should get out of the Ukraine.
Rabbi, with that in mind, is there anywhere close by that's really safe for the Odessa Jews to go to? Any place at all?
It's called Israel.
Well, yes, not exactly conveniently located next door.
But not next door, but not as far as you would think. The Ukraine, at least the eastern part of Ukraine, is not that far from Israel. One of the reasons that Israel was established, besides being the historical biblical homeland of the Jewish people, it is a land of refuge for Jews who are caught in a surprise uprising where they have nowhere to go, where the doors of entry to other countries are closed to them, and Israel has a law of return, where a Jew in distress, and I don't mean financial distress, I mean physical danger, has a place where he can or she can immediately take their family and go and resettle in a hospitable country, which is Israel. So Israel is not that far away. Certainly, if you get on a plane, I bet you could be in Israel within a couple of hours or so.
Well, keeping that in mind, have there been any pronouncements from Tel Aviv, anything from Prime Minister Netanyahu on the situation that has developed in the Ukraine, or does just the standing invitation of, if you will, of Israel to Jews in distress take precedence over any type of pronouncement that might be made?
I don't know, and I have not heard of any official pronouncement from the Prime Minister, but there's no question in my mind that under the radar, there are invitations being offered to leaders in the Ukrainian Jewish community, invitations from Israeli leaders to get their people, if they feel it's necessary, out of Odessa, out of the Ukraine, and that Israel will facilitate their arrival and will make sure that when they come, that they're not orphaned, that they'll have a place to live, they'll have opportunity. I'm sure that all of this is happening under the radar screen. You know, throughout history, when these upheavals happen, the Jewish people have been particularly the targets of these upheavals. That just seems to be the history. In this situation in Ukraine, there'll be Ukrainians that will say that the Jews are on the side of Russia. And there'll be Russians that will say that the Jews are siding with the Ukrainians. We've had this in our history. The capitalists call the Jews leftists, and the leftists call the Jews capitalists. No, I don't think that Mr. Putin per se is anti-Semitic. He's actually quite different than the historical leader in Russia, be it at the time of the Tsars or in the time of the communists where they were anti-Jewish. Putin does not seem to be so, but there are many native Russians that are, and certainly Ukrainians. And I think it's time for the Jewish community to uproot themselves. It's hard. They have homes there, businesses, family, it's their culture. But I think the destiny for them is Israel.
Now, Rabbi, some analysts are saying that this weekend things could get worse in Odessa. Is there an explanation behind that?
Well, you have tempers at a fever pitch. During your prelude to the interview, you mentioned about the people that were attacked and were burned. And we had the mayor in one of the Ukrainian cities that was not assassinated, but he was shot at, and thankfully he's okay now. He's living. He happened to have been Jewish too. And I think all of these things are coming to a confluence. You've got raging tempers, and it deals with nationalism and identity and culture. And I think that the logical conclusion of what we've seen in the last 3-4 weeks will eventuate in even more blood and violence. So it's time, I think, for them to go.
With this in mind, and you've recounted how literally the Odessa Jews are caught in the middle of this fight between the Russian nationals and the Ukrainians, would there ever be a type of, I wouldn't want to call it a military action, but we know at times there are efforts made that are coordinated to evacuate people. We think about our own Marines going into situations to get Americans out of harm's way. You mentioned that you don't believe Mr. Putin is anti-Semitic, but given where this crisis is right now, would he allow the UN or even the IDF to come in and help evacuate Odessa's Jews?
No, I don't think so, because to do so would be an acknowledgement on his part that the situation is out of control. Mr. Putin does not want to acknowledge that he's created chaos. For him to do so would to say that it's a dangerous situation. I think what he would do instead is he would say that things will be under control, and perhaps he would assure the safety of the Jewish community. But I thought that you might be alluding to the fact, remember years ago, JD, Entebbe, where the Israelis went into Africa. Where was that? Uganda?
That was in Uganda, Idi Amin's Uganda, and Prime Minister Netanyahu's older brother was the lone Israeli casualty in that military operation.
That's right. He actually died. He was murdered. So I thought, but I don't think that there'll be necessarily an Entebbe type of operation. This is more difficult. Also remember, there it was clear who the bad guy was in Uganda. Was it Idi Amin during that time?
That's correct. It was the dictator Idi Amin. You're right,
yeah,
Rabbi.
JD, we're revealing our age. Now, but see, for many people, that's history. For us, that's just current events. We lived through all this.
Right, and it was a dramatic and it put an end to Israelis and Jews being in danger. Rabbi Aryeh Spero, we hope you'll come back and visit with us again. We hope it's under better circumstances, but we will depend on your expertise, your historical knowledge as we do it. We also note your book, Pushback, Returning to American Judeo-Christian Spirit. Rabbi Aryeh Spero, we thank you for your time here today on America's Forum.
My pleasure, Jake.
So, what is your take on these tensions in Odessa? Are the Jews right to prepare to evacuate? Why don't you tweet me at Newsmax TV, #America's Forum.